Welcome to this last flow in the Pigeon series. I hope that so far it's been a good experience and you've noticed and learned a few things about your body. Today we're going to have a little bit of a mixed practice. We're going to be doing some stuff down on the floor on our backs. We're going to get onto our hands and knees. We're going to pop up and down downward dogs, and then we're going to come into pigeon pose and then end back off in child's pose. So for the practice today, I would have a couple of yoga blocks or block-like objects, a strap, which I don't think we've used so far in this series, and one or two yoga bolsters or bolster-like objects that you can use just to hold yourself off of the ground if need be. But otherwise, feel free to get creative if in this practice you're noticing you could use a little more support, fill in a gap where the floor feels really far away from a certain body part. Find something around you in your home that you can use to fill that gap and give you that support that you're craving, okay? So to get started, we are going to lay on our backs. We're just going to take a moment in a corpse pose, just letting the body relax into the floor, feeling heavy, coming home to the breath, feeling that rib cage expand and lift and fall back down. You can have your hands on your rib cage too, if that makes picking up on that a little bit easier. And you can just do a quick little scan to see what's feeling good today, what's maybe feeling a little cranky today, maybe what's feeling a little restless today. Just things to notice and come back to later on in the practice. We're going to bring our knees up, feet in towards the bum, and walk them out kind of wide so that the edges of your mat are sort of down the center line of each respective foot. You can start the windshield wiper type movement really up high, so both legs are just windshield wipering from one side to the other, nice and slow and smooth. Noticing the sensations that happen in your body, noticing the shifts that happen in your body, and noticing that as your knees drop further down, because you can slowly deepen this each time you go back and forth if you want to, the further down that your knees go, the more that starts to lift the opposite hip, the more that starts to lift the spine away from the floor, starts to introduce a little bit of a spinal twist. You might start to notice that twist happening further and further up your spine. Maybe you start to notice some shifting in your shoulders or your arms as your body lifts more. It just depends on how big you go. So we'll do a few more back and forths here. Making sure you're breathing. Notice any sensations that are occurring. What is your body enjoying? What's it maybe not enjoying? Is there something that you can do or do less of to make that crankiness kind of settle? All right, bring those knees back up through center. We can bring those feet back in on the mat so that they're more hip width apart. This is where we're gonna grab our strap, okay? So grab the strap, bring it around the ball of the right foot, and we're just gonna send that foot up into the air, aimed for the ceiling. Now, your knee does not need to be straight. Your leg also does not need to be this up and down. You might be here, you might be here. If you don't have as much length in your hamstrings and your foot needs to be lower, but that makes your leg feel really heavy and that's hard to maintain the position, let there be a bend in your knee so that you can bring the thigh more in towards the chest. Okay, so just play with ways that you can make this feel comfortable and manageable to hold for a while in your body. Creativity, exploration is key. So long as you are not causing pain or other uncomfortable symptoms or worsening pain or uncomfortable symptoms that were already there before you started this posture, then you're doing fine. We just want to be feeling pretty good. It shouldn't lead to injury or aggravation if everything's feeling pretty copacetic while you're in it. Okay, let's unhook that strap, set it aside for just a moment. We're going to come back to some windshield wipers again. So bringing those feet wide, letting the knees drop side to side just a couple times to each side. And then we'll do that extended big toe on the left. Noticing if when you do this windshield wiper after doing a little bit of a hamstring stretch there, if maybe anything feels different on that right side. All right, we can come back through center, bring the feet back into hip width distance, put that strap around the ball of the left foot. Let's bring that leg up. And this is kind of a choose your own adventure for each leg. What can this leg do? Maybe it needs a similar shape as your other one did. Maybe it's feeling a little tighter and it needs a bit more of a bend in the knee or a bit more foot lowering to the floor. Or maybe this leg actually feels a little more comfortable here and you can actually straighten that leg a little bit more or bring that foot more towards the ceiling. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if one side needs one thing and the other needs something different. It just shows you things that you can work on, and in the meantime, you are going to accommodate each side in whatever it needs. All right, let's bring that strap off the foot. We're going to bring the left foot back down to the ground next to the right. Okay, you are going to walk your feet in towards your bum just a bit more, and you'll play with this and find the distance that feels best in your body. Arms are on the mat, palms down. We are going to play with bridge, okay? So you don't need to lift super high if that's not in your repertoire right now, but we're just going to squeeze the bum cheeks and push our hips off the floor. And then lower them down. You can lift again. Watching what is happening in your thighs. If your legs want to splay apart, you can place a block between your thighs. You're not going to be squeezing the block really hard, but just the fact that you need to hold it there is going to help you avoid just letting the legs splay, okay? And you can play with different bridges. We're just moving up and down. Hold it for a breath or two if you can, or just move in and out of it. You can also try peeling your back off the floor up into a bridge, one vertebrae at a time, until you're kind of right along the backs of your shoulders, and then lowering slowly, one vertebrae at a time. We can also take our fingertips and place them on that pochiote bone in the front of the hip and our thumb at the lower rib cage. We can get ready to take the weight of our upper body just across the top back of the shoulder. The distance that's between your fingertips and thumb, if you are able to bridge hinging at that shoulder and just lift straight into it, the distance between your fingers and your thumbs shouldn't really change much. Versus if you lower back down and you leave your fingertips and your thumbs in place and you start to peel, you will notice that your fingers start to move and then your thumbs start to move. And if you've got a lot of arch through the back, they might be stretched away from each other versus in towards each other. Okay, so just play with different ways that you can lift your hips away from the floor, where the movement's coming from, what can stay quiet, how it can move. Just explore it. Okay? From here, we're going to lower our hips. We're going to have our feet on the floor, hip width distance apart. This is where you might want to have blocks or bolsters or blankets on either side of you. We are going to let our knees just gently fall out to either side. So if you have a lot of flexibility available, you might be able to just go into this position, no problem. If you're feeling a lot of tension or like your body is fighting gravity, build up the floor underneath those outer thighs and just find that edge where there's a little bit of sensation happening, but not so much that your body's kind of panicking. And from here, we're going to take a nice breath in. And we're going to do that pursed lip candle breath to find that core, that low core, gentle engagement in this position. Again, it's going to feel different. You're laying down on your back so that in towards the spine movement of the abdomen is going to feel very subtle because already everything is sinking with gravity towards the spine, towards the floor. Breathe in. But if you can start to pick up on the sensation of that core slightly engaging, even though there's maybe not as obvious of a feeling of the belly moving towards the spine, it comes in handy when we eventually, in other practices, practice some core kind of exercises on our backs. All right, bring those knees in towards each other, and we are going to get ourselves to our hands and knees. So you do whatever works best for you to get into that position. We are going to find a tabletop position. Hips are stacked over knees, shoulders are stacked over wrists, neck is long. We're just looking straight at the floor, between our heads and slightly forward, between our hands and slightly forward. And we are going to play with some scapular push-ups. So what that's going to mean is the elbows are going to stay straight, but we are going to let our chest move down towards the floor. And that is going to cause our shoulder blades to kind of essentially move towards one another. And then we're going to push away from the floor to send those blades away from each other and move the chest away from the floor. Okay, so we're going to play with that a couple more times. Scapular push-ups. So again, the elbows are not involved. We're also not cat-cowing the back. The spine is staying in a tabletop position. The arms are staying in a tabletop position, but we're letting that tabletop spine just lower towards the floor and then raise back up. Okay, a couple more of these. They can take a bit to get the hang of. If you're struggling with this, you can visit a previous breakdown I did for Thread the Needle where we do this movement against the wall sitting. So gravity's not in the picture. I will link that in the description below and possibly at the top of the video screen. Okay, coming back to tabletop, we're going to exhale into cat. Inhale to cow. Exhale to cat. Inhale to cow. Come back into table. Find that scapular push-up again. Okay, pushing away from the floor, tabletop, curl the toes under. We're just going to rock the hips back towards the feet and then come back up to table. Again, this movement, the spine is basically staying nice and neutral, and the movement is mostly coming from the shoulders and the hips moving in and out of flexion and extension in tandem. The knees also have to bend and unbend a little bit to accommodate. But right now the goal is to really get those two sets of ball and socket joints, the largest joints in the body, moving in tandem, okay? So from this tabletop position, we are going to find that lower abdomen, gentle 100 candles core engagement, and we are going to just hover the knees for a moment and then bring them back down to the floor. Now, you can walk your hands forward a little bit. We are going to, once again, find those 100 candles, hover the knees, push back into downward dog. Bend the knees, rock, body rock through the hips and the shoulders to bring the knees gently and slowly back to the ground. Hover the knees, body rock, shoulder and hips back into downward dog. Start bending the knees again, body rocking forward, slowly and gently lowering those knees back to the floor. Okay? Now, we are going to be lifting up into a downward dog, lifting our right leg into a three-legged dog, and then coming into a pigeon. So, before we do that, make sure that you have any blocks, pillows, cushions, bolsters, whatever, nearby, so that once we get down there, if you need to shove things under a hip or under a knee or whatever, it's easy to do, okay? So coming into that tabletop, hands are a little bit forward, curling the toes under. We're gonna find those 100 candles, hover the knees, push back into downward dog. We're going to lift the right leg, come up high on the ball of the left feet, curve the back, bring that knee up high into the chest, step it through, bringing that shin to the floor in front of you. You can let the top of the back foot rest on the floor, and feel free to grab any kind of props you need to put underneath that right hip. It's going to keep you up a little bit higher off the ground, but it's going to make it a little bit easier to keep your pelvis kind of can't think of the right word right now, but a little more comfortable. You can take a bolster or blocks to have in front of you so that you can have your hand here instead of having to go all the way down to the floor if you want to stay up high. You could also come down forward into more of a swan restorative kind of thing. And of course, if this is still just a bit much and the work that we've been doing is making progress but has not quite gotten you to this point, please feel free to put that back leg into more of a deer leg position, or maybe you do like a lizard. It's a little more active, but it gets, you know, the different parts moving in the right directions. You know, whatever you need to do to make this more comfortable. Maybe you grab some chairs and you do that seated pigeon. Or a great alternative for pigeon is always to just lay on your back or sit on your bum and do that figure 4 position with the legs. That's a fantastic alternative for people that are just not quite getting that back leg behind them just yet. Okay, we're gonna move whatever we need to out of the way. You can transition out of pigeon. We're gonna aim for a downward dog again. You can do whatever you need to do. If you can, you're gonna curl the left toes under, lift the knee, use your hands in that left foot to lift yourself and basically reverse what you did to get into it. If that's too much, there is no shame in scooting that left knee in, getting this one behind you, getting into tabletop. And I am the queen of awkward transitions in some yoga classes. I don't care. I don't need to always make it look smooth. Sometimes I just do what feels good. And sometimes that's taking a bunch of little steps to get there when other people do it in one fluid movement. It doesn't matter. It just need to treat our bodies well. So hands are a little bit forward, finding those 100 candles. We're gonna hover the knees, body rock back into downward dog. We're gonna lift that left foot, come up high on the ball of the right, bring that knee in, suck it into the chest as much as you can, curve that back, and place that left leg in front. Take a block, stick it under that left hip if you need to. Now I should note that some people will cue for this front leg to come out on quite an angle so that your shin is parallel with the front of your mat. You don't need to do that. If your foot is kind of back here and your heel is almost at your crotch, totally fine. Still a legit pigeon pose. To have your shin parallel with the front edge of the mat requires a lot of hip external rotation. If you don't have that much external rotation, it can put a lot of stress on your knee to try and force your leg that far up. So I much prefer to just cue people to keep that foot in towards the groin if that's what they need to do. And for some people, that's all they ever get, and that's totally fine. It's still pigeon pose. So, the work we've done in the beginning with cat and cow and table and all these things where we were pushing away from the earth to create space through the arms, strong but supple elbows, they're not locked out, they're not hyperextended, spacious shoulder joints, upper shoulders are down and away from the ears. We still want to find that here in this pigeon, which is why I like to build up my hands a bit here, because if I was down low, I can still do it, but it just feels more comfortable to be up high. So just see what you can find and what kind of heights you need to put your hands at in order to maintain that. You might find, once again, like I mentioned before, that one side, your pigeon, needs different supports than the other. One side might feel quite different than the other. It's totally fine. All in good time. All right, we are going to move any props out of the way. Hands come to the floor. Again, transition out however you need. As you build arm, shoulder strength, hip mobility, spine mobility, some transitions might gradually become easier and accessible to you over time. I'm going to curl my toes under, lift my knee, lift up, and basically reverse my way out of pigeon into the downward dog. Okay, you can walk it out. And we are going to end today's practice in a child's pose. So bringing the knees down to the mat. I prefer a wide-legged child's pose. You can do whatever you want. If you're like, you know what? I want to lay in Shavasana. Lay in Shavasana. All good. Hands outstretched on the mat, forehead can come to the floor, and we're just going to relax. We're going to get heavy to the ground. We're going to let that torso, belly rest onto or in between the thighs. We're going to feel our breath. We're going to feel our back rise and fall, rib cage expand and retract. We're just going to feel it all. Do a little check-in. Notice how things are feeling. Do the spots that felt good earlier still feel good? Do the spots that felt a little cranky earlier still feel cranky, feel a little different? Do things that maybe felt restless before feel more settled? Whatever you felt before, do a little check-in and just see how things have landed after our practice today. Alrighty, so you can stay here for as long as you want to. But if you are ready to get up, just take your time, take it slow, find something to sit on, come to a seated position, hands on knees, maybe some neck rolls, bit of breathing, and just notice how things are feeling. Alrighty, I'll see you next time. All right, so that concludes the Pigeon series. I hope that you have gotten a few really valuable things out of this entire process, and maybe by now you're even starting to notice small changes in your Pigeon experience. It may not be totally revolutionized yet, and that's totally to be expected. It's a different process for everybody, and it can take time. But there's a couple of things that I really hope you got out of this experience. I really hope that you were able to see how bits and pieces of a more complex goal can be found in some of the more common, simpler, or more basic movements. And then, speaking of those more basic movements, as much as I call them basic, hopefully you're starting to learn how much nuance and depth can actually be gleaned out of those as well. For instance, cat, cow, and table doesn't just have to be about you moving your spine. Cat, cow, and table could be a series of movements that you pass in and out of in order to practice your awareness around your shoulder blades on your rib cage, the engagement in your shoulder girdles, creating space in your joints, becoming aware of what your elbows and wrists are doing in response to load, especially if you're a person who tends to have hypermobility. Maybe you're dealing with some low back, pelvis, pelvic floor things. You can use cat, cow, table to observe the movements in the pelvis, how that relates to the spine, how that relates to your thigh bones, how your pelvic floor responds to the shifts. There is so much that you can get out of these simpler movements depending on what your goal is and how you place your intention. I also hope that you really notice my emphasis on doing what feels right in your body in this moment. Everyone's body is going to feel different day to day. Everyone's going to progress differently. Everyone has different history. Everyone has different goals. Any yoga practice that you participate in is simply a suggestion. It's an invitation. You get to listen to your body and decide if you need more supports, or if you need to modify something, or if you need to do something different. It's up to you. Where confidence comes in is as you do things like this, my hope is that you start to learn how you can give yourself more support, play with modifying things without necessarily needing the teacher to tell you how to do it, right? Because it's hard when you know you need something a little different, but you don't know what that looks like, and the teacher isn't cueing for it. I also hope that what you got out of this is that you may never get to Pigeon, and that's okay. It is not for everybody, and it may be your end goal, but you may hit a point where you go, you know what, this is where the train stops for me. And that's all right. We have gone over different ways that you can position yourself, support yourself, bend your legs, do things to modify Pigeon or have a Pigeon-like experience if you're in a class setting and the teacher cues it, but you're not going to be able to follow it exactly. All right? It's your practice. It's your body. The only big thing is that you listen to your body and you don't move into pain or pain increasing or just cranky symptom increasing positions and movements. Now, I do have another program that I'm planning on designing. It's in the very, very early stages, so I don't have a timeline yet, but it's going to be all about downward dog. It's going to be a little more involved because we're putting considerably more load onto our arms and our shoulders, and we have less contact points with the floor. It's probably going to be a larger program. with more mini practices along the way to support people through the process, as well as some print offable kind of aids or guides as well. But like I said, I'm in the very early stages. I don't know when that's coming out yet, but if that's something that interests you, stay tuned. If you have any ideas or requests or questions that you would like to see addressed in that series, please let me know. You can email me at hello@getbodywell.com. I would love to hear from you, but otherwise, keep practicing. I'll see you on the mat.